Welcome to the Family Office Sherpa podcast. I'm your host, Shaun Parkin, founder and managing director of Hall Road Investments. The aim of this podcast is to provide practical and implementable advice for those looking to build, manage, or service a family office. This is not, however, investment advice, so please check the disclaimer in the show notes. In this episode, I'm going to go through the concept of the power of saying, I don't understand.
This is the Family Office Sherpa.
Okay, so what do I mean by I don't understand? I think it's one of the most powerful tools in terms of getting clarity, in terms of getting consensus, or at least getting an understanding of, are we going in the right directions? Now, I'm using this in the context more aligned to the investments and investment governance, but really it does make sense across the entire office, getting a really clear understanding of what are we doing, right? So like I mentioned, I'm rarely the smartest person in the room, but more often than not, I am, if not the most, I am certainly curious. That's a big part of my role. So in investing, I believe curiosity is one of the most important, concepts that we have, especially when we're in this sort of area of AI and being able to sort of plug in prompts and stuff like that. I think one of the biggest value propositions for people like myself, or people that sit within that more investment governance piece, is the power to say, look, I'm just really interested in finding out what you mean by that. And it's not because intelligence isn't valuable, right? Cleverness, but because unchallenged, it can be dangerous sometimes, which is, through things like, and we've all seen it, right? Which is very confident, very jargon heavy, and a momentum with the discussion in particular. Maybe there's a new investment coming through and kind of steamroll some of the potential objections here. And that momentum sometimes fills a room, even when people don't understand it. And people are less inclined to stop that momentum once it sort of gets up and running. So like I said, one of the simplest and most powerful things you can say in any investment discussion is also one of the hardest. And it is because it does open people up to, why don't you understand? Why don't you get this, right? And I think this is where I don't care if people think that I'm not as intelligent or clever. I will not go past a point in time where I don't understand what we're doing. So I thought this episode would be helpful in sort of giving some context and maybe arming people with the ability to say, if it's not, I don't understand, it might be a different version of it, right? So let's go through them. So number one, do we actually understand what we're investing in? And do we understand what this actually is? It's amazing how often this question is, this element of I don't understand what we're investing in comes back with negativity, or sometimes not necessarily aggression, but certainly like, so exposes uncertainty, but it is a really, really powerful people, because what happens in these sorts of, if people don't understand what they're investing in, but they see everyone nodding their head, the slides are moving on, decisions are getting made. No one wants to be the person who slows down things, right? But slowing down things is often where is potentially the most valuable thing that this, investment committees in particular can do, because it means being able to, if you say, I don't understand to someone doing the investments, it means being able to, their job is to be able to explain what's going on clearly, honestly, and without hiding behind, like I said, language or bravado or momentum. Like, we want to slow it down. We don't want to handbrake things. This is, like I've always said, we're not a handbrake to investments. We are just getting people to understand what we're investing in. Another one is simple explanations are a test of real understanding. We've all kind of heard a version of that, right? But a rule of thumb that I guess I've developed over time is, if someone can't explain something simply, there's a good chance they don't fully understand it themselves. And, when you're talking about products or services or something, like, often it's, you're getting sold something by someone that's like, okay, or has been told to pitch this particular solution for this particular conversation. If they don't understand it, a lot of the time you're not actually getting advice here. You're being sold something. You're getting sold a product, something that, potentially might work or potentially might not work, but it is our role within the governance structure to make sure that we understand what it actually is, and we need that explanation. Clarity is what we're seeking. We're not looking at it to be dumbed down. Okay, that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for clarity. And clarity, a lot of the time, is evidence that someone has mastery of something. In my experience of the best investment advisors, investment managers, specialists I've worked with over 26 years, they've got an ability to explain complex ideas in a way that builds understanding rather than shutting it down. They take questions like this as an opportunity to educate and to explain and to expand on things. They don't become patronizing. They don't become defensive. What they do is they meet that curiosity with, for want of a better term, education, which is what we're really seeking. And especially in family offices where, that is a really hard thing to do. Another one is, it's your money. You're entitled to understand it. This is why this whole concept of I don't understand is, it's your right, to be honest. Like, it's your money as a family. So this applies to everyone in managing the capital. If you're the family or you're the advocate for the family, which is often my role, when we face off against external managers, even the internal investment team, our advisors and consultants, you're entitled to understand what is being done, why it's being done, how risk is managed, what success looks like. Like, if we invest in this, what does this look like? And what failure looks like. Like, what's the potential what's the potential failure here? If we put this investment in the portfolio and this happens, especially if we think about, I don't know, like an asset like credit or some version of like counterparty risk, or equities, which can go to zero. These are things that we need to understand. Where it sits within a certain part of the cycle. If we go into, I don't know, inflation environment, deflation environment, these sorts of things. These are all questions that you should be able to ask people. It doesn't, if someone doesn't like these questions being asked of them, like I mentioned, those sort of our internal managers, external managers, all these sorts of things, if they don't like it, that's information in itself, right? It's not good information. Like, we don't want that to happen, but it does inform the fact that if they don't like questions and queries about what they're doing and what the implications are, like I said, it's not a good thing, right? And to those people, I say, I don't know, get another gig. Look for another client, not us, right? So we're not here to manage money, to impress industry panels here. We're not here to sound clever. We're looking for good communicators, people to educate and help us understand, and people can speak with genuine expertise simply and with clarity. And for why family offices force this honesty, right? So when I say, I don't understand why family offices uniquely placed to do this. One thing about family offices is you have a principal. You have people or principals or family members, they can stop a meeting. This isn't a panel. This isn't a corporate. This is sometimes individuals go, hang on a second, I don't understand what you're talking about here. They can challenge the explanation. They can tell you, you know what, if you're not going to be articulate, it sounds like you're trying to do something that we don't like. You can just tell your story walking a little bit, right? And I think that's a healthy thing. Obviously, we're not here to be aggressive and all the rest of it. But if we aren't getting the information that we want because we don't understand why, then we can stop it, or the principal can stop it. It's very, very powerful. It keeps our counterparties, I don't know, we can interrogate them and keep them honest. We want them to be a good partner, but we also don't just take advice for no reason or just go, oh yeah, that sounds fine, right? Like, this is not what we're after here. It keeps things like incentives clear, keeps focus on outcomes and things like that. But that principle thing, this is where the family kind of forces that honesty. So let's think about it from a practical point of view, right? So let's go through where I don't understand really helps in practice, which part of the investment office. So as part of the investment committee, first thing, in an investment committee setting, saying I don't understand is often a really valuable contribution. It breaks down, especially if there's consensus. One of my things that I love doing is when people are, especially sort of more complex structures, if you're seeing people going, oh, I'm not, you can see it in their facial expressions and things like that, which is, I don't think this is time to move on. We're not just going to, push past this investment explanation. We're going to dig a little deeper into it, because what that does is it sort of breaks this idea of, false consensus, which, everyone in the room said yes, or something like that. No, we're going to stop. We're going to say, I don't understand. You need to explain this better. It exposes where, I used to be in distribution, right? And there's an element of, I'm just going to be confident and say it like in a way sometimes that I'm just going to take it as read that everyone understands what I'm talking about. And that's not the case, right? It also, what it does, and when I break that momentum a little bit, what it does allow is to give other people permission to speak up, right? A strong investment committee isn't one where everyone agrees quickly, right? It's one where good ideas survive scrutiny, which is what we're trying to do. We're scrutinizing, we're interrogating. I've used the metaphor in the past, which is this idea that the investment committee writes the rules of the game and then the investment managers play the game. But we're going to blow the whistle sometimes, right? We're going to say, hang on, no, I don't think that that's correct, right? Next one, when doing due diligence in terms of managers or in terms of investments or services or whatever, it's not, in my experience anyway, DD isn't just about proving how smart you are. It's about interrogating it, but also reducing regret, for want of a better term. That I don't understand forces the manager or the counterparty to sort of explain the risk, not just the return. Clarify things like where judgment sits, right, as opposed to process. Like you get a lot of, in particular on active equity managers or active managers sort of going, well, this is where our alpha sits, right, within our, and then you go, yeah, but is that the person or is that the process? And just understanding. My favorite things to sort of do is to put forward sort of, well, what would happen to your portfolio if this happened? An example would be something like, okay, you say you are a growth manager of equities, right? Or your growth at a reasonable price or some version of that, right? And you go, well, would you participate in a market that looks like this? Or would we expect underperformance because you're not participating in this? And we would expect that you would have things like lower drawdowns or something like that. So just getting an understanding of what scenarios might mean for different things. What we're looking for is repeatable outcomes from managers. And if someone can't explain clearly what's going to happen to this portfolio if, during certain parts of the cycle or things like that, it will be misunderstood when we do have things like, we go against it underperforms against our benchmark, or it outperforms other managers when we would probably expect it to underperform or at least keep to the marketplace. So, these sorts of things around the DD process is really interesting. And it is really where I do a lot of my heavy lifting, I guess, which is to try and get people to a certain degree, expectation management, right? Next one, when reviewing the governance structure, which I do a lot of, right? So governance documents, decision trees, IC terms, things like that. So if I see sometimes I'm just brought in to not write or help write the investment policy, but to review investment policy and the current structure. So a lot of the time, what I love doing is saying, see this bit here, I don't quite understand how this either fits in or it doesn't make sense, or within the decision-making process, I can see that there's a gap here. Who makes this decision? When do we escalate it? Well, what's our, or even something as more prescriptive as like what benchmarks are we using, or, these sorts of things, right? So what happens when this happens, right? It's all these sorts of things. So I love looking at investment governance and investment policies. And when I sit on an investment committee, I need to understand, or I need to be comfortable with that investment policy or that IPS is I understand it, because that's my job. My job is to make sure that our investment managers and all the people are managing to that investment policy. So that's not going to work if I don't understand it. Another one, which is, the power of I don't understand, comes in when you take over an existing portfolio, because inheriting a portfolio can be really dangerous, but certainly it's that initial, it can be fraught, right? And this is why if you're coming in as a new investment manager or portfolio manager, or even, as an advisor, there's a really good versions of I don't understand, which can retest the assumptions. You might have a different way of managing portfolios. You might just not understand, okay, well, we have this asset and this asset, or this benchmark and this total return expectation, but it doesn't seem to match. We don't have capital market expectations or assumptions that match our total return expectations. Things like that. Our risk isn't very clear. We do see a lot of that. Like, what sort of level of risk are we looking to do? What I look to take on? What's our liquidity profile look like? All these kinds of things, right? So we're not trying to criticize the past here. You're just trying to understand it. And then you, as a new portfolio manager or advisor, your job, and often there's a reason why you've been brought in, is to make sure that it's very clear and actually working. So another two. So the other two that I've seen this work really well is when you're a new advisor. So a new advisor comes in and you need to understand why, what's the purpose here? What's the, you're going through the investment committee, or you're going through the individual. Help me understand how this works today, and help me understand how you would like it to work in the future. Right? That's really good I love that question when new advisors come in. And when you are the family, right? When you're, and I'll leave on this one, but one of the ones is when we get new advisors, a lot of the questions from the family should be things like, I don't understand how this particular portfolio should work. I don't understand this jargon. I don't understand, this trade-off and things like that. If curiosity is such an important thing when you're dealing with new counterparties and new service providers. And honestly, that question should happen at the beginning before you start to onboard them and things like that, and I've experienced this a couple of times, which is when they don't welcome that level of interrogation around sort of I don't understand, it means that, like I said, they're either trying to sell us something, or they don't understand it themselves, or they're not the advisor for us, right? So a bit of a final thought. I don't understand does three great things, which is it filters out things like poor explanations. It filters out, I guess, weak conviction. And sometimes, and this is really important as well, it sometimes filters out things like misaligned incentives, misaligned expectations and returns and all these sorts of things. So I'll leave that at the end, right? Which is, if the power of I don't understand really does mean that people have to make you understand. And if they don't want to do that, then maybe they're not for you. So hopefully that was helpful. If you're interested in understanding more about how I work with clients for this kind of thing, sitting on investment committees, being that critical friend or that advocate or that person that says, I don't really understand what we're doing here, then you can email me if you're a family office, Shaun, so SHAUN, at wholroad.com.au, or you can message me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. If you like the content in this podcast, you can also subscribe to the Sherpa newsletter. You can find that at wholroad.com.au, and that's been going for 7 years, and that's a curated sort of links and my little sort of thoughts of the day. It's, like I said, it's been going for a long time. It's very popular and really nicely engaged readership. If you're enjoying the podcast, please ding the alert bell. That's always super helpful. If you can rate it, even if it's just putting like a cup, the star rating on there, it takes like 2 seconds. That helps. And when the next one's published, you'll get alerted to it. If you're interested in all things Family Office Sherpa, go to thefamilyofficesherpa.com, where you can see the podcast, newsletter, guides, and videos. Until next time, thanks for listening.